Hello and welcome to another That's Just Wild Q&A, where we take on your burning questions about nature and wildlife. I'm Steve Backshall, and as always, I'm joined by...
Me, Lizzie Daly.
And me, Sarah Roberts.
For ad-free listening, our newsletter, special deep dive episodes and members-only benefits, you can subscribe to us at that'sjustwild.com.
Okay, here we go, everyone. First question for you, Steve, today is someone special. Robin Ince, host of the Infinite Monkey Cage.
Hello, Steve. Robin Ince here. My question for you is, what is, to you, the most improbable animal? Of all of the creatures that you've seen or heard about, which seems most improbable? Oh, and there goes the 115 from Crew.
Lots and lots of things spring to mind. You could say that it's improbable that any animal is here at all. Thinking about the process of how everything from microbes to mammoths has evolved is kind of mind-blowing, but there are some that stand out particularly. One of those would be the platypus, a mammal that lays eggs, that looks like you've taken a beaver and sewn a duck's beak on it, that has a venomous spur on the hind leg in the males. You know, that's pretty out there. But I would like to suggest, as my most improbable animal, the naked mole rat.
Oh.
Do you know what one of those is like?
Fun looking.
They're pretty ugly.
Yeah, to any of our listeners who don't know what they're like, imagine a human scrotum with four...
Oh, now that's harsh.
It's not wrong.
Four big ratty teeth on the outside of their face. So the teeth actually go in front of the lips. They have these teeny tiny, almost impossible, piggy little black eyes, and they live burrowing below the surface in burrows. And there's so much about them that is just out there. Lizzie, what's your favourite naked mole rat weirdness?
My favourite thing about naked mole rats is that they walk backwards through this network of chambers. They have specific chambers for certain things. And they are remarkable to watch. I've actually seen them I think it was in Chester Zoo, they've got naked mole rats. And you can watch them run backwards through these tubes, go into an area chamber that's where they nest, and then they run into another one, and you'll have a few of them perhaps feeding. They are the weirdest things. And as you say, and it's in the name really, it's literally a naked, hairless, wrinkly old sausage that just is this like subterranean weird wonder. It's such a good pick.
You were more PG-13 than I was in describing that, Lizzie.
I got to bring in the younger viewers.
And Sarah, have you got anything cool about naked mole rats?
Haven't they got like a really interesting social structure?
Yes. Naked mole rats are arguably the only eusocial mammal. There's another mole rat species that kind of does the same, but eusocial is like what the ants, wasps and bees do. So having a colony in which you have one queen, who is the only one that's allowed to breed, and the others are effectively different castes within that, but they are subservient to their queen from chemical cues, which is, to say the least, improbable. I mean, that is the thing that really stands out. There's no other mammal species that has anything even vaguely similar to that. Lots of different kinds of social structure amongst other mammal species, but nothing like naked mole rats. They are also probably the mammal species that has the best resistance to cancer, to low levels of oxygen. They live their entire lives in burrows where there is almost nothing to breathe, and they seem to get along absolutely fine. And they have different castes like ants and bees do. So yeah, utterly improbable. I would give you the naked mole rat. But either of you two got any super improbable animals?
Yeah, I have to throw in the eye. And again, they kind of go in the weird, wonderful and quite ugly category, don't they? So they're this kind of nocturnal lemur that uses a strategy called percussive foraging with their giant middle finger. And that essentially involves tapping in a way that's like echolocation. They'll tap along the bark of a tree to essentially listen out for insects. And then they'll use those big, ugly teeth to gnaw a hole in the tree and get that finger and kind of scoop out any grubs, larvae, any potential insects that may actually be in the tree to feed. We actually filmed last year with an ii, and my favourite thing about the whole thing was when this ii started percussive foraging on the head of the cameraman, which to me feels like perhaps there wasn't much in it. Maybe it was slightly hollow and he was like kind of looking for some food. I don't know. But
Who is your poor cameraman?
he will know exactly who he is. But yeah, it's they've got to be up there with the most weird and wonderful, surely.
And Sarah, do you have an improbable animal for us?
I don't know about improbable, but definitely memorable, the coconut crab.
Oh, yeah.
Because if anyone's not seen a coconut crab, you would almost think that it was a prop from a Halloween costume or something. They're enormous. They climb trees. They have lungs, so they live on land a bit like a hermit crab. But they look, in all intents and purposes, I say, like a really thick-bodied, enormous, hard, more like a spider in the way they move as well. They're kind of creepy the way they move. But they're also really cute and characterful, depending on how you look at it.
They are a hermit crab, aren't they? The largest species of hermit crab.
I think that the little ones, they have the shells, don't they? They actually use a shell like a hermit crab would. But then as they get to being adults, their body goes really hard and they don't need the shell. That's why I think they look more spider than anything when you see them like tottering off up a coconut tree or anything. Ugh.
Agreed. And with claws that can cut open a coconut. Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, for you, Sarah, from Sam Mitchell on Instagram, which animals have the most toxic parenting traits?
I would say, I mean, obviously the first thing that springs to mind is the lions and the infanticide. So for anyone that doesn't know, infanticide is when you get a new male that enters a pride, if it's lions, and they come in and they kill all the cubs, and it means that they can mate with the female quicker. I don't class that as parenting because technically that male is not related usually. But I had a bit of a dig around, and one of my favourites is the sand gobby. So the male is left in charge of these eggs, which they're supposed to guard and look after. But the same male also really wants to get a bit frisky with other females as soon as possible. And in his, I guess, his will to go and meet other females, what he can sometimes do is eat a few of those eggs to get them gone quicker. So the larger the eggs, the longer they take to hatch. So the males have been known to just go and eat some of those larger eggs, just so that they can get away sooner and carry on, making more babies with other females, shall we say?
Love it. Can I throw one in here,
please?
Because I've always wondered this, and this is so simplified what I'm about to say, but cuckoos, right? Okay, they're known brood parasites. They lay their eggs in other birds' nests, but I'm thinking, who's the more toxic parent? Is it the host? So whether it be, the warbler or dunnock, who is completely oblivious that they are feeding and helping perpetuate this toxic relationship by feeding the cuckoo, or is it the cuckoo? Because it's pretty evil.
Well, it's interesting you say that because there are examples of birds anyway that favour specific offspring. Like some will only feed the older of the eggs that hatch, or they might decide, oh, that one's prettier, I'm going to feed the bright coloured pretty one, I'm going to ignore the other ones. So maybe they think the cuckoo's the bigger, older, stronger one, and they're doing it a favour. But I thought Steve, is it not the cuckoo chick that pushes the other siblings out, non-siblings, I suppose?
Yes, yeah, that's right. Although the cuckoo parent, when it arrives, may well bin a couple of eggs, but then actually just out competing the youngsters, as Lizzie said, classically something like a reed warbler. I see where you're coming from, Lizzie, because not only does the egg look different, but then the young bird is bigger than the parent. It's bigger than the reed warbler that's feeding it. So is that good parenting to be looking around and going, yeah, I'm just going to keep feeding this massive supersized bird that's bigger than I am and ignoring my own offspring? I mean, you could easily go fight that cause.
The imagery sometimes of that I've seen of cuckoos literally spilling out of the nest, and you're like, how do you not know that's not your young?
Here's a question though that really got me thinking: how do they know to do that? What comes first? Literally, is it the cuckoo or the egg? How do they know to lay their eggs in those specific nests. There's no instinct at all to sit on their own egg.
Well, nest appropriation is something that's relatively common. So a nest takes enormous amounts of energy to build, and whether it's using some other animal's nest from the previous season or actually moving in and getting a bird out of a nest so that you can use it, that is something which happens all the time. So you could argue that it's a relatively simple step to being there, laying an egg in that nest, flying off to feed, and coming back and finding another animal's doing the job of brooding it for you. I can see how that process could evolve over deep time. I have absolutely nothing to back that up. That has just purely come out of my head, and I can guarantee that there are some ornithologists right now writing some very angry letters. I do, though, have a wonderful, macabre example of some of the worst parenting that you can imagine. It was while we were filming Springwatch Trackers, which was we had one season of this with wonderful Kirsten O'Brien filming live at the Springwatch farm. And we were going out live as well for CBeebies and CBBC audience. And we had access to all of the live cameras. And we threw live, bearing in mind that our audience are all 4, 5, 6 years old, to a camera where a barn owl chick ate its sibling while the mum just looked on and did absolutely nothing. And it ate it whole and just like and swallowed the whole thing. And I was there going, oh my gosh, that is the most sinister thing I've ever seen. And we got to the end of the series and it was
Cancelled.
Without question, the favourite thing for all of the audience. The audience were all like, oh my gosh, that moment where the owl ate its brother, that was genius.
Oh my God.
It's not uncommon as well, is it? Either. Then just in this year's Springwatch, they had long-eared owl chicks, and overnight one had died, and there was this kind of live sequence of my friend was editing. He said he just saw the female just decapitate the young and then start feeding it to the others. It's like, yay, nature. Part of it, though.
I feel like that would be the slogan right there. That's just wild. Moving on.
Yeah.
So the next question is for you, Lizzie.
Okay.
And it is, why aren't pandas ferocious like other bears?
Okay, it's an interesting way of asking the question. I guess starting with the word ferocious, and I don't want to sound like that person that's now going to be all like, technically they are ferocious, but they're also not. I guess you're talking about that kind of aggressive behaviour, and we consider some species of bear more ferocious to us because they're more dangerous to us. Depends on the location, environmental factors, the species, a variety of things. So let's just give a few examples, I think, just to talk about what that kind of aggressive behaviour may look like. Polar bears, of course, are mostly carnivorous, and the environment they live in means that for a lot of the time they'll be, exploring large areas of territory with little food. So they're opportunistic. They'll want to take advantage of any food options that are available. And so when it comes to, human interaction, they're probably the only bear that before they kind of go into any predatory attack that I would say be mindful of, because of all those environmental factors and their general resource availability and behaviour. They are what we would class as ferocious. If you go look at the brown bears, grizzly bears and black bears, they're omnivores. So again, they're, it depends on territory and food resources, competition, whether we startle bears, how we come across them in the animal kingdom can really drive either a very natural behaviour that they're not interested, or that may go into kind of what's described as then an attack or defensive behaviour from a bear. The other kind of ferocious bear that I do want to talk about is, of course,
the sloth, surely.
Yeah, surely, yeah. And again, completely different again. I would class them to be as aggressive and ferocious, if you like, as as the polar bears, but for a completely different reason, because their aggression comes from defense. Because as they're feeding around looking for termite mounds and ants, they don't have necessarily good vision, and they're not concentrating on anything but that feeding. They have their head down, and so more often than not they come up against predators such as tigers very last minute, and they go from 0 to 100 and go straight into that kind of dominance battle behavior. So pandas, long way around of answering your question, but everything about a panda's life isn't pointed towards having to go into these kind of big hunting behaviors, attack behaviors that we see with our carnivores or our omnivores. Of course, a lot of their diet is exclusively bamboo. It is a resource that's relatively available, widespread in their habitat. It's also a low nutrient value food as well. So having, I guess, these explosive hunts and attacks is not necessarily in their ecology if you compare it to other bears. So they can, I will add, they can absolutely defend territories. And they do. The females especially have quite strict boundaries of territories. But more often than not, they're quite lethargic, they're conserving energy, and of course they're eating bamboo. So we see them less as ferocious, I'd say. Would you say that that's a fair summary, guys?
Seems pretty good. I got a sloth bear tale.
Please.
Yeah, go for it.
I was working in a sloth bear sanctuary where they were rescuing these sloth bears because they used to be used as dancing bears in a very cruel practice. Anyway, we got into this wonderful enclosure, and 2 sloth bears decided to have at it with this full-on MMA scrap. It was one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen. These 2 animals tearing chunks out of each other. And then the lead conservationist said, well, so you can go into the enclosure if you want and talk about them. I was kind of like, but seriously? I've just seen them really eviscerating each other. Okay, right. So team, we are on absolute wildlife rules, total silence. Nobody even move too fast. Everything goes super, super quiet and careful. I walked up to this sloth bear and I started doing a very considered, very quiet piece to camera. And my producer leant forwards and with both hands grabbed a hold of the electric fence in front of her and leapt 6 feet in the air, let out a sound I've never heard a human being let out before. I was like a foot away from this sloth bear.
Like Jurassic Park.
Yeah. And I think it's just pure chance that I kept my face. It was a very, very close call indeed.
Did they go for you?
No, but I mean, I think that, 9 times out of 10, it would have just turned around and just eaten my face.
I think, do you not think we've been made quite... My perception of a panda bear has been completely biased by social media and those breeding areas where you just see these ridiculously cute hunks of fur just basically roly-polying down the hill and trying to grab hold of sweeping brushes as they're trying to clean up in those little orphanages, breeding facilities, I suppose they are, aren't they? But I've never met a panda in the wild. Have any of you guys?
Oh my gosh, no.
No.
I'd love to. But that roly-poly behaviour you talk about is an actual response to getting away from potential predators, is what they think. So even though it looks cute on YouTube or whatever, that there is a kind of a driver for that. Have you, Steve?
I haven't. I should say that a panda skull is pretty much identical to a black bear skull, and there's no question that should that animal decide that it was in a bad mood or that you were threatening it, that it could make a right mess out of you.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Final question, Steve, is from listener Claire in Inverness. Oh, sorry. When you're on expedition, we often see you slip a bottle of whiskey into your kayak. What's your favourite tipple? Is that true?
No, iced tea in a very funky bottle.
Okay.
Come on,
Don't
I still
believe
do
that.
children's television. We can't be talking about my drinking habits.
Of all the things you've said on the show, that's the one
not
you're
it.
worried will kill your career.
No, fair enough. So what happens is whenever we go on an expedition, if we can carry it, we'll say, right, everyone gets one luxury item, and inevitably it's a bottle of booze. And what quite often happens is you'll rock up, and the night before you're going into the extreme wild frontiers, everyone gets a little bit nervous and they drink it. So you just end up starting your expedition with a horrific hangover, and instead of your super posh bottle of Dalwhinnie or Coal Isla or Lagavulin or whatever, you've got some £50 pence a bottle local hooch, which will probably make you go blind. But we don't go without the booze. I mean, that goes without saying.
I love it. Is it always whiskey as well?
No, whiskey, rum.
Mm.
We had on one of our expeditions, I shouldn't tell this story, but we were deep inside an extinct volcano in New Guinea looking for new species. We'd been there for a long time. It was utterly miserable, knee deep in mud, leeches, mosquitoes, and we completely run out of all booze for quite a long time. And we had a mammologist with us who was collecting specimens, and our sound recordist asked if he could have some of the alcohol that he used for preserving specimens. And the mammologist said, well, I've only got ones that have already got a specimen in it, and you're very welcome to have that if you want.
Stop.
Yeah.
Is it not ethanol?
Apparently it was okay.
Oh my
But
God. Well diluted.
it had a, pickled fruit bat floating around
That's
inside it.
Delicacy in some countries.
Let's move on, shall we?
Speaking of pickled fruit bats, I got a stinker of a question for you, Steve, to follow that, actually. Our economy is based on continual expansion. Is there an alternative? Oh.
Yeah. And I'm guessing the extra bit you'd add onto that is an alternative which is also kind to the planet. It brings me in mind of Sir David Attenborough's words when he was quizzed on the same subject, and he said that anyone who believes that infinite expansion on a finite planet is possible is either a madman or an economist. And we have this obsession nowadays with GDP and with growth. I mean, what does GDP mean to you or me or anyone else? Surely there are better metrics of success than that. And the bigger, longer term, prognosis has to be that when we have 10 billion people on the planet and all we're seeking is growth without end, our planet does simply not have the carrying capacity for that. It is impossible. Most of our modern economic theories, Keynesian economics, Marxist economics, neoclassicism, they're like, pre-1950s. They're not even, before we had the internet and all the things that we have now, and certainly at a time where we had 30% of the people that we have now. So we need a different strategy. To anyone who'd like to learn more about this, I can recommend Kate Rayworth's Donut Economics. It's an amazing book which aims to find a kind of system of economics which can work both for people and for the planet and for nature and for animals too. I was given it by Caroline Lucas, who was the only Green MP for a little while. For a little while I was considering running for Parliament with the Green Party, believe it or not, and got this amazing book which has got a system that could allow us to have an economics that just works for everybody and for the planet. The sticking point being that there are an awful lot of very, very wealthy people who have a sincere amount of investment in the status quo and how we do things now. But it kind of seems to be all of the other things in conservation come back to this one simple crux, whether it's overfishing, whether it's climate change, deforestation, they all come back to this overpopulation. They all come back to this one simple thing. Would you agree? I mean, Sarah, this is right up your street, right?
Oh, God. Yeah. I think if we break it into something really, really simple, how different do you think the situation would be right now if money didn't exist and we only traded in actual goods? So we take away that disconnect where we're just paying with a card or paying away, and we have to see exactly how much of everything is left. Because I know often we talk about carrying capacity and we just think of space, but there's so much more to it in everyday products that we use. It's not about physical space. It's about how you can grow all those crops or how you have the space for the fish to migrate and find all the food that they need. And it's so much more complex. And I think when we have our monetary system and we're basically trading in an IOU, which is what a note is, I think we're so far removed from the reality of how much there is and how much is left and what the real cost is of taking those things. So deep for an early question.
Yeah. Lizzie, can you answer this existential question in one sentence or less?
All I'm thinking about is that clever title talking about donuts when referencing a circular economy. I think it's genius. I just now want donuts and want everyone to be happy and live forever.
Seriously, you
No, I'm
have
kidding.
given the greatest question of our times, and it made you hungry.
I think it's a clever marketing technique. No, I think it's interesting what Sarah's talking about there. You know, how we measure that growth. And there's arguments to, you know, focusing as well more on well-being economies. I don't want to kind of go into too much around this because it can get a bit complicated, but you know, in places like Bhutan, where they really focus on ecological health in our landscapes and as a species, you know, in our health and happiness being a really important part of it. There's also a need, I feel, for degrowth in places like the global north, and places where arguably that degrowth is least likely to happen. You know, a place where we're built on social inequalities, we have huge environmental impact, and at what point will we start to not only halt how we're growing, but reverse that growth? I really find it hard to wrap my head around, just because it just seems so unlikely, not to be negative. But you know, I would argue that depending on where you are in the world, and your background and so many other different factors, depends on how that should look. And we in the global north absolutely have a bigger price to pay, I feel.
I love that you mentioned Bhutan there, gross national happiness.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's wonderful.
People think about it as being incredibly, impossibly naive, but actually, to the vast majority of people, what is more important? Our own happiness, the air we breathe, the soil that we grow things in, the water we drink, the happiness of our families and our children, or gross domestic product.
This is it.
Seriously.
Yeah.
We've got it all messed up. Anyway, should we move on to some quick fire questions at the end? So I've got one here from Bella. Are mermaids real, and could they help save the ocean? Well, the first mermaid myths came from things like dugongs and manatees, believe it or not, the ugliest creatures on the earth, but absolutely awesome. And they just eat seagrass. So yeah, absolutely they could save the ocean, and they are totally real.
Love it.
I got a question from Evie, which is, what do plankton eat? And the answer is, depends on the plankton. So there's zooplankton, which are little animals. And so they eat other plankton or dead matter or just little tiny microscopic things. And then there's also phytoplankton, which are like little plants. So they eat sunlight in a way. They're photosynthesize.
Lovely. Harry B, do crocodiles have to swim all the time like sharks to breathe? Good question. You're talking about a process called ram ventilation. And no, by the way, ram ventilation for sharks, where they have to kind of force water over their gills to be able to extract oxygen. Crocodiles do not. They are reptiles, of course. They have lungs. And in fact, they rely to be brilliant predators that they are on kind of staying still for long periods of time. They can submerge in water for up to an hour. Steve, you'll be able to verify that. Longer than an hour, a few hours. Yeah, absolutely incredible. But much of their life relies on them being completely still, no movement, and waiting as ambush predators with just their nostrils and their eyes sticking out. So yeah, absolutely not. Final one for all three of us from Chris Smith, who came to see us at our first ever live podcast recording in Cheltenham. Love that. If you had the power to save one creature from extinction, what would you choose?
The Keter, because it's the most pressing. World's smallest porpoise, probably only 12 left in the Sea of Cortez. That would be the one for me.
I'm going to cheat and say pollinators. Can I?
No,
So
good, strong.
We couldn't live without them.
No, that's important. But which, so you're just going for the whole set?
All of them. All the pollinators. Well, yeah, we literally
That was a good cheat.
couldn't survive without them, yeah.
I did like that. Well, I'm just going to go for a real sad little hedgehog, because I just feel bad for them. And we don't have many creatures in the UK, to be honest, anymore, do we, in terms of wildlife? And hedgehogs are just one of the saddest little squashed ones out there.
Oh my, you always end on an up note. That is that's a bleak end. We've got no wildlife here in the UK. What we have is dying. And that's it for this week.
Can we pick something else to end? Or maybe tell us why you love hedgehogs, and we'll end on a positive there.
I don't
like them that
I
much.
love hedgehogs. I think, do you know what? I think your answer was the best, Lizzie, because you're hitting on the key thing that there's no point in saving one thing because everything's interlinked.
And hedgehogs are beautiful, wonderful, curious little things. That's it for this week. Please keep sending your questions along to questions@that'sjustwild.com. We love reading them.
Now, we are just a tiny, hairless Joey of a show, so any support's really welcome. You can follow us on your favourite podcast app. Leave us a review. It makes all the difference to the whole team.
And for ad-free listening, our newsletter, special deep dive episodes and members-only benefits, you can subscribe to us at that'sjustwild.com. Remember, we're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and in the Mariana Trench, and you can find us at That's Just Wild Pod. Thanks for listening. Bye.